Evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us to hear our recommendations that we want to put in front of the community for feedback regarding a possibility of a new roadmap for the Rochester City School District. And we're going to hear from our subcommittee. Um, Sorry about that. We're going to hear from our subcommittees about reconfiguration of our zones for our district and the schools. And we're going to get our feedback from our community regarding some of the examples that we're going to put in front of you. So, my name is Janelle Morris. I am Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning for the Rochester City School District. And we have our public hearing today where we're going to have the opportunity to hear from the community regarding our recommendations. We will have an opportunity to hear from speakers that have signed up in advance and be able to hear from each one of these speakers. The speakers will have the opportunity to ask questions and also to give their feedback regarding the presentation that we hear. After that, we will have an opportunity to hear some of the questions that were submitted in advance. And then there will be opportunity to hear about the survey that we will also have ongoing so that we can collect additional information regarding this presentation. So once again, welcome everyone. We hope that today's purpose of this public hearing is for everyone to share their feedback regarding the recommendation that you will hear. You will hear later on that there are two subcommittees, one for managed choice and one for zone reconfiguration. Tonight's public hearing focuses only on zone reconfiguration. So each member of the community who has signed up and wants to speak will have exactly 2 minutes to provide their feedback and or ask questions. The team and the task force is present so that we are able to answer the majority of your questions. Any questions that we are unable to answer tonight, we will make sure that we post publicly so that everyone is able to get the answer and have access to that. We will also talk about the feedback survey that we will be delivering. We will also provide additional insight to the work that we're going to do regarding the task force and allowing the community to have additional input into this very important work. So what this presentation is a comprehensive way for us to present the options that we have developed for your input. It is an opportunity to provide a step in the creative process, and we are still open to options and recommendations, and we want to make sure that we receive your feedback and use that to adjust and consider that in the options that we present. And it also considers various concepts such as the capacity of our buildings and projected enrollment, as well as other variables that are related to zoning. What this presentation is not is a formal proposal. So tonight we are presenting 3 options that the subcommittee has determined is options that could be considered for presentation to the Board of Education. The task force is one that does recommendations, and they will present these recommendations to the Board of Education. They will not The task force does not make any decisions. We present our recommendations to the Board of Education, and then the board makes decisions. We are not presenting any document that lists any school by name. We are not trying to prioritize any particular school or any type of level, and we're certainly not trying to prioritize schools with one over another. And it does not tonight also present a detailed plan that would include any type of itemized costs. Tonight is simply a high-level review of some recommendations that, based on the information that we have reviewed, we have come up with ideas that might be a way to resolve some of the frustrations and or feedback that we have received from the community regarding the current zoning that we have in the district. So all of the work that we have done thus far has been organized around the Rochester City School District Strategic Plan. We have made sure that every aspect that we are looking at in terms of realigning zones and making proposals are aligned with the 4 pillars of our strategic plan, which look at high quality learning experiences, ensuring an inclusive, caring, and safe learning environment, collaborating and building a strong community, and also developing our workforce to lead our students in their achievement. So the task force was charged with looking at a policy that exists already in the Board of Education. And this is the parent preference / managed choice policy 5153. The scope of this particular policy expands around student enrollment, school improvement, student mobility, home schools, and transportation. Things that are all related to the overall charge that we have been given to look into and try and come up with some ideas to address. This policy will look at things such as school zones. So we have looked at the zones that are currently existing for some of our schools, looking to see if we are using our facilities effectively and efficiently, looking at the methodology that has been used currently for school choice, looking and determining whether our current policy best supports sibling preference, looking at how proximal students and their families are to their schools, looking at socioeconomic diversity and making sure that it is truly representative in our zones and in our school and throughout our district, looking to address things such as student mobility. Are our students grandfathered into certain schools and or programs? And how does that affect other enrollment for other students that may want to get into schools or programs? Looking further into the lottery for placements, voluntary transfer, and also maintaining and expanding the offerings available in citywide schools. And then making sure that in any recommendations that we put forward in front of the Board of Education, that it examines such specialized programs that meet the needs of our students, such as those who are in special education program services. And lastly, looking at the schools through the lens of accountability and trying to look at making sure that we are able to make suggestions to the board that will help heighten the accountability status of our schools. So currently we have 3 zones in the Rochester City School District. These are represented on the screen right now in colors that are green, pinkish, and blue. So the green is the northwest zone. We also have the northeast zone, that's blue, and then we have south zone, that's at the bottom. And these 3 zones are the zones that are outlined in the policy that I just described. And so what we had were 2 subgroups of our overall task force, where we have made sure that we looked at the existing lines where the zones are, and we're trying to make sure that we can make a recommendation to the board to consider, are these lines drawn in the area that are best suited to ensure to ensure educational equity for all of our students? Will these lines be better suited if they were drawn in other configurations? Would we be better suited if we leave everything as they are? Will we be best suited if things are changed or we add or decrease the number of zones that we have in our school district? The subcommittee that looked at the zone reconfiguration that was their task, to look at existing work that had been done in the district to examine zone reconfiguration and see what their best recommendation would be to date about what we could do to make sure that students have the most equitable access to resources and schools and programs, and if the change in the reconfiguration or the zoning would make an impact for that. So in December 2020, the independent monitor, Dr. Jallo, charged our district to take a look at those lines that I just described on the map. These lines are currently designed in a way where Dr. Jallo challenged us to take a look at, is this the best configuration of the zones in the district? Are there particular changes that we can make that would help make us more efficient and better suited to serve our needs of our students? So we formed a zone reconfiguration task force in December, and the task force has been diligently moving and meeting since January to go over lots of data that had been generated before. There had been task forces that had looked at zone reconfiguration in the past. So the team has reviewed that and has looked at other data and other information that helps to inform the information that would help us form a recommendation for the Board of Education. And so they have been looking at all of this different data to help us support and advance not only the elements of the strategic plan that I've already explained, but also the independent monitors' academic and financial plans in the district. And this is where we have formed our concepts to share at this forum tonight, which is going to look at zone reconfiguration. And we will also have a future forum where we're going to be looking at managed choice and that policy and asking for public feedback. That will be a future forum, and we will make sure that that is publicly advertised so that if you want to come back and give us feedback about that, we welcome your participation. And so we want to collaborate with students, parents, staff of the Rochester City School District, and other valuable community partners to make sure that any decisions that we are able to give recommendations towards for the board will have that opportunity for feedback prior to us presenting that to them. So our anticipated timeline is in December, as I mentioned, we convened our task force. Between January and March, the task force participants really spent a lot of time researching, looking at existing challenges, and then we are going to do our survey in conjunction with this public meeting that we're doing now. We're doing this public meeting where we're going to be able to hear from our subgroup regarding any type of recommendations that they will have, and we welcome the feedback. And then we're also going to spend the next month and a half meeting with stakeholders, conducting community interviews. We want to have more smaller, intimate meetings where we're able to meet with smaller groups. We're going to have focus groups, and also we're going to have another forum where I mentioned where we're going to discuss managed choice and the placement process for our students. We hope to continue to engage the community and then present our recommendations based on our research and the community input to the Board of Education for their consideration at the in May or June. So as I've mentioned, we have two subcommittees of the overall task force. The task force had two very specific charges. One is to look at zone reconfiguration and looking to see if those lines as they are currently drawn best meet the needs of the district. Additionally, we have the Managed Choice Subcommittee who will not be presenting tonight, but they have another additional very important task where they're looking to determine the placement process for our schools and making sure that we have the most educationally equitable process in place for our students, and to use that information to make recommendations to the Board of Education as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the table to our subgroup, and that team is consisting of Dr. Peluso, Dr. Green, Joseph Baldino, Kelly Briggs, Annalie Cruz Famani, Katerina Leon Manino, Carl Kanya, Amy Tata, Terry Orden, and Deborah Washington. And I'm going to turn over the gavel, so to speak, to Dr. Peluso. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. And thank you. So today I'm going to present a little bit of the work that we've been doing with our subgroup on zone reconfiguration. We know that it's been pretty important as we continue this process to really work hand in hand with also the Managed Choice Subcommittee, because each of our decisions have impact on each other. So if you go to the next slide. The subgroup really took a look at some bodies of work that was done prior. Michael Elves was a consultant hired by the district in 2001. He provided a elementary school parent preference managed choice plan that we reviewed as a subcommittee, and then also looked at it again when it was a review of that policy was done in 2014. We also dove into some data sets. One, student count by zones, how many of our students attend schools and in which zones. We also looked at our K-8 2019 data of where did our students live in 2019 in the grades kindergarten through 8th. And then we did the same thing with a review of the 2021 data, looking at where students live by school, K-8, and then where do they live by grade level. So that really kind of sparked our conversation and led us to some things that were mentioned in the next slide. Was regardless of any of the discussions that we had, we felt that it was really important to ensure that there was access to successful programming citywide, right? That this, however the zones are reconfigured, that there's access to successful programming. That we maintain equitable access to services and programs. We had really lively discussion around bilingual programming and special education programming. That we ground our decisions in data. We try to be as least disruptive to our families as possible. And then we had some conversations about our unintended consequences with zoning, the school demographics, the makeup of our schools, and then, are there other costs associated, such as transportation? We can move to the next slide. So through our conversations, we really came with three recommendations, three thoughts that came to us. And one of them would be splitting the schools into two zones along the Genesee River into an east and west zone. This will provide obviously an opportunity to provide more choices to our families. We'd be going from 3 zones to 2 zones. It also allow us to increase the opportunity for vertical and horizontal articulation. We'll be able to create some feeder patterns based on how we configure our schools as a K-6, then to a 7-8. So we have some feeder patterns. We could look at our facilities to make sure that they're being used to the best way possible. And then we could also examine our fiscal efficiency. So those were some of the thoughts when we were leaning towards our 2 zones. We also discussed our 3-zone model and the opportunity to do no change, keeping it in the Northeast, Northwest, and South like we currently had. Some discussions around equity of programming. Do we have the bilingual programming equally in each of those areas? Do we have the students with disability programming equal within those areas? How does the feeder pattern look? So those were some of the discussions that we had around our 3 zones. And then our no zone, which we called our no zone, would be more of our neighborhood school model. And then also taking a look at, if we went in that way, how do our catchment areas, we'd have to really do a deeper dive into some of the data. How do our catchment areas line up to schools? Do we have enough students in a catchment area? Do we have to expand our catchment area? Do we offer multiple choices to families within a neighborhood to make sure that we're maximizing the schools as best as possible? So with the no zone and neighborhood school model, this also has a direct impact to the managed choice policy. We would have to do a deeper dive a little bit around our catchment areas and what they would look like. So those were the 3 recommendations that we had come up with from our subcommittee.
Thank you so much. So with those 3 zones, we will shortly open up the opportunity to get feedback and answer any questions, and also address any questions or comments that have already been submitted. But we wanted to show you guys where we are in the line of our area and requests for feedback. So as has been described, we have spent a lot of time over the past 3 months looking at previous work, examining the process of looking at what's been done, what we think are ideas that we can consider moving forward. And now we're at that middle part where it has a circle where it says we are here, where we're trying to refine the options that we have developed and get that feedback from our community engagement, asking the community what they think, having a survey delivered to collect additional information, having discussions with an advisory group, and also having a focus group opportunity for the community to be engaged. And we want to look and focus in areas that relate to academics, transportation, and finance, making sure that we include that community feedback in that collection. Then, as I mentioned, we will bring these recommendations to the Board of Education for their consideration, making sure that we take into account any community feedback that we have collected. And as I've mentioned, we really want to have as much feedback and involvement from the community as we can. So your insights are very, very much valuable, and we want to include your perspective in the recommendations. So we want to make sure that the recommendations that we put forward in front of the board will represent our shared values, priorities, and concerns. So we encourage your participation if you're looking or viewing this public meeting, that you engage this way, but we also will have the various ways that I've described already for you to participate, also including sending in comments or questions via our website, which we do immediately receive, and we are able to address and answer once we receive those. We have a website that is specifically dedicated to rezoning and these questions that you may have. You can contribute those and that is www.rcsdk12.org/rezone. So we really appreciate you listening to our presentation today and listening to our overview of our 3 recommendations. And we look forward to receiving any comments or questions or feedback that you may have about what we have presented tonight. We will have a survey that will be delivered, and it'll be available on our website that I just described beginning tomorrow, where we would like, if you can, to give us your feedback about the 3 options that were just presented, as well as give us any additional feedback or questions or comments that you may have so that we can best support your incorporation in that feedback that we develop for the board. So thank you so much. We are going to go ahead and open this up so that we can start to hear from people who have signed up to speak. So I'm going to pull up the list and then we'll have our first speaker come on in the room. So our first speaker. All right, so our first speaker will be, hold on, I'm sorry. Our first speaker is Daniel Gildia. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Daniel, you have 2 minutes, please.
Hi, I won't use the whole 2 minutes. I haven't heard any reasons that this current system isn't working. I'm not really sure why we need to change it. And from my perspective as a parent, I think the current system is fine. Personally, I chose the school closest to my house, so it wouldn't make a big impact whether there were 2 or 3 or no zones. And that's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Susie Gutierrez. Do we have Susie tonight? Pronounce that correctly. Daniel, you have 2 minutes, please. All right, Erica Mock, you are next.
I haven't heard.
Erica, you can begin whenever you have a chance.
Perfect. Can you see me?
I can, thank you.
Wonderful, great. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Erica Mock. I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives here in Rochester. I'm coming to you today because of the rezoning and to really implore the historical nature in which Rochester City Schools has really for lack of a better, but I feel participated in the racial discriminatory policies and practices that have affected our children. Specifically, I'd like to kind of implore everyone for a call to action from something that Frederick Douglass personally dealt with here in Rochester in 1848. His daughter Rosetta was forced to leave Rochester Public Schools based upon the color of her skin. He had to move his daughter to Albany schools to finish her education. From 1848 until 1857, he had to take on the charge of challenging the racial discriminatory policies and practices that plagued this city and its children. Finally, in 1857, Rochester Public Schools was desegregated. My call to action for Rochester City Schools is for you to value and look at those policies and procedures that have indiscriminately affected our children and will affect our children in the future. So I implore for you to please look at those policies and procedures in your process of rezoning and make sure that these schools are not shut down that are affecting these community schools and these children that have to walk and deal with the things that are happening in the city. Their education should be valued. So while it may be better for the district from a economic standpoint, it won't value the children, or it won't benefit the children later on if those policies and practices and procedures aren't considered when this rezoning is taking place. So once again, I pray that it doesn't take an additional 9 years to once again desegregate Rochester Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Donna Lamora, you're next.
It won't value the children, or it won't benefit the children later on if those policies and practices and procedures aren't considered when this rezoning is taking place. So once again, I pray that it doesn't take an additional 9 years to once again desegregate Rochester Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Donna, you can just mute the feed so that you won't have that feedback.
Have I got feedback?
Yeah, we could hear the prior speaker, but now you're fine.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
My name's Donna.
Value the children, but it won't benefit the children later on if those policies and practices.
Just mute the feed in the background and then you'll be all set.
Okay.
So once again,
I'm not. Oh, okay. I'm going to turn off the YouTube.
Perfect.
Hopefully, now can you hear me and see?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I am a retired educator. I have taught at the high school level and the college level. I am here because I've become involved with some educational groups, and I feel that improving the city school district is the #1 thing that that needs to be done for our children and for the city itself. I feel that the city has to provide more support for the district. My concern with the rezoning is I'm a believer in neighborhood schools. I would like to probably see smaller clusters of maybe 5 or 6 elementaries so that services could be provided within that smaller cluster, and parents would have a little bit of choice, well, enough choice, and that you could have your strong bilingual and your strong special ed. So that's my concern. I am working with a group that's looking to get more busing for local schools, not just over the 1.5 mile limit in order to create more of a neighborhood school. It's better for the parents, it's better for the local neighborhood, and it just allows more involvement in between parents and the school. So that's what I have to say. I'm a little concerned that there's not more data here. I would like to know more about the data. Local neighborhood.
Thank you, Donna.
Okay.
So we're going to go on to the next speaker, but I just want to also take a question that came in from YouTube. The question from Molly Ball on YouTube was, I'm unclear as to the timeline for this process. If a change is made, is the idea to grandfather in recommendations in order to cause the least disruption to families? And the timeline for this, we will put forth the recommendations to the Board of Education between May and June of 2021. So that's in the next month or two. However, the recommendations that we will put forth in front of the Board of Education would not take effect or be in place prior to the 22-23 school year. So the upcoming school year would not be impacted by any recommendations that we would put forth in front of the Board of Education. And there would be minimal, we are trying to develop a process and a timeline for changes that would allow for the least amount of disruption to families. So our next speaker is Toyin Anderson. So Toyin, you are next.
Can you? Oh, thank you. Janelle, I have actually, I'm a parent. They have me as community, but I'm a parent in the district. I have 2 children. So, whatever happens definitely impacts my household. And one of the biggest questions that come to mind with the thought of this rezoning. I just truly want to know what exactly is the district and everybody involved trying to truly accomplish with this change. That's the biggest question that I would like answered, because I know from past experience that a lot of times we do things not centering children and family. So the changes that are made aren't necessarily made for the best interest of the community. So I personally want to know, what's truly the North Star when we decide of all these three ideas, when we choose and select how our kids are expected to be impacted on our communities. That's important to me. And for the task force that, are being developed, what percentage of that is the parents and community, the voice? Because I know there's surveys and stuff, and we always get an opportunity to participate that way. But how much of it is the parents from the district gonna be expected to participate? So that's kind of my input. I just truly want to know how beneficial it would be, I would say, for a parent like myself and the children in my household when we consider this rezoning. So that's kind of my input right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next speaker that we have is Paul Conroe.
So that's kind of my input right there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next speaker that we have is Paul Conroe.
All right, here I am. Let me mute my.
So that's kind of my input right there.
Let's see, can you hear me right now?
I can hear you. If you just mute your feed, then you'll be fine.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Hang on a second. All right. Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Number one, I'm a big neighborhood schools advocate. I'm listed as a staff member, but I'm an RCSD grad, went to East High School, and I have 4 kids in the district. Number one, all neighborhoods have academic all-stars. All neighborhoods have dedicated parents. All neighborhoods should be designed so that there is a feeling of pride and joy in the community, and it's schools. We have schools that are not sources of pride because very few people in that neighborhood attend that school. All neighborhoods have students with a range of abilities. And we can talk about race, which is really about economics. And we have to address that point head on. Equity can be achieved when we allocate resources to schools, by allocating more resources to schools that have more students that are more costly to educate. So some neighborhoods in a given cycle may have higher need for reading teachers and resource teachers, but every neighborhood is still going to have those academic all-stars. And we don't need to concentrate them in these privileged schools of choice. One unintended consequence of the current zone lottery is that RCSD demographics have become less racially and economically diverse over the last 20 years. A second unintended consequence is that families that don't participate in the policy, those children become leftovers. And they're placed at schools at the convenience of the district, not for the benefit of the child. And that's almost half the kids. And nobody gets up and talks about them and says, hey, the kids that don't participate because their families didn't meet the deadline, well, the district has an opening at a school way the heck across either a zone or the city, and that's why the kid goes there. And the performance of the kid is negatively impacted. And the third unintended consequence of the zone policy is that parents who don't have personal transportation and their child is assigned across a zone or across the city cannot go to school events easily. So my last point, and I'm trying to, this is my 10-point plan. If we do this correctly, neighborhood schools can actually mitigate and reduce student transiency. Because if a family likes the neighborhood, and I don't care how poor the neighborhood is, or if it's all black or all white, people are people. if you have pride in your neighborhood, you will want to stay in that neighborhood and go K through 12, stay in the RCSD. And that's what I think we should all be talking about, is how do we get parents to stay K through 12 in the RCSD the way I have with my kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. All right, so I believe we have one more speaker, Chris Standino. You're all set whenever you're ready, Chris.
Okay, you can.
I can see you and I can hear you.
Oh.
Okay, we can't hear you now, though.
You can't hear me now?
Okay, you're good. You're good.
Okay, great. I wasn't expecting to speak. I had submitted some questions, but I will make a couple of comments. And I do want to begin with the fact that I think the key question for me is, how does the community partner? You can't hear me?
No, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, because somebody's telling me to start talking. You can hear me? No.
Just mute. If you have a feed going on, mute that, and then you'll just hear us.
Okay, how do we part? Can you hear? So how does the community partner?
If you have any other mute feeds on, if you have Facebook or YouTube, just mute all of that, and then you can speak, and there'll be no interruptions.
Okay, I didn't think I had anything more on.
Oh, okay. Well, I hear you just fine right now.
Okay. How does the community? Hold on.
Okay, you're off mute now, so you might be able to try it.
Okay. How do we partner with you to effectively put children and families as the center of any changes that occur? I've listened to a variety of things that people have shared, and my concern is that both the transportation issues
You were fine. We could hear you. It seems like we're not able to resolve that. Do you want to just write it? Okay. I apologize for any technical difficulties. So definitely we'll use your comment, and you've already sent in questions. So thank you. So our last speaker who has signed up to speak today is Megan Reddington. So Megan, you are next.
Hi there, can you hear me? Great, thank you so much. So I do understand after listening tonight that my comments are more for the managed school choice policy, and it sounds like that's going to be an upcoming meeting. I did want to speak to that I am a parent of 3 students in the district, and after hearing just briefly about the options on the table for the rezoning, I am definitely more in favor of less zones and really looking more at no zones and redrawing those in catchment areas and those attendance boundaries so that we can create more diverse neighborhood schools. I think that leaving the zones open is really just an easy way for the district to say that, oh, you know, you've got school choice, but we're really doing a disservice to our families. I know originally the managed school choice policy was meant to create more integration in our schools, but after 10 years in the district, I've only seen it become more segregated. So I would say that the district needs to do the hard work to really look at how we have less zones and more economically diverse attendance boundaries and encatchment areas so that we can do the hard work of building relationships between schools and the neighborhoods, because we know that teachers and students and families need those relationships to succeed for student success. And we need to hold the district accountable to build those relationships. We got rid of parent centers in each of the zones years ago. It's part of the managed school choice policy. And currently we have no one who's really overseeing this policy. So there were, you know, great intentions, but the policy didn't work. We need to get rid of zones. We need to redraw attendance boundaries so that we can have more integrated schools. And you'll hear again from me on the managed school choice meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So we have completed our list of speakers that have signed up. Thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to come tonight and listen to our recommendations and to give us your perspective.
It's okay.
So I appreciate all of the questions. And so we're going to take some of the questions that have been submitted via the other sites that we have, such as YouTube, where we're streaming this right now, and also on Facebook. So we have a question that came in from Teresa Kenyon on YouTube that said, I'm all for neighborhood schools, but what happens when people move and the only place they can find is out of their neighborhood? Does the student then have to switch schools? So I won't speak for the other team members on the task force, but one of the things that we are looking to preserve is something about student mobility, where we're trying to make sure that we have we're trying to eliminate disruptive practices to students when you move, where it impacts the school that the student goes to. So I'm not sure if any of the task force members want to chime in with some of the ideas that we had thought of, but what we are trying to do is make sure that we minimize the disruption to students when we have our normal mobility around the city as students and families move from one neighborhood and or zone to another. All right, no one's unmuting, so I'm going to assume that there's no one who wants to chime in right now. There's another question that came in. Why? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
One of the things we looked at for the managed choice was that we would do it maybe once at the end of the school year over the summer, try to balance things, but not do it every single time a family moves during the year. That was kind of a compromise, because when children move around, it does detrimentally affect their education. So that was one of the things that we looked at as a possible proposal.
Thank you so much, Joe. So another question that we had was, why did they start the lottery system to begin with? I'm not sure, but we can see if we can come up with maybe some of the history with the lottery system and what its original intent it was and whether it's still meeting its purpose now, that probably will be covered a lot more in depth when we have our managed choice task force presentation in the future. Okay, I'm looking to see if there's any additional questions that have come through. Okay, and then there was a question that came through, do the zones include all schools, elementary and high schools? So yes, the zones that we have been discussing this evening would include all of the schools, but there are certain schools that are considered to be citywide, and those citywide schools would access students from any zone, no matter what school what neighborhood they live in. I don't see any additional questions right this second. Okay, here's another question. So we had a question about how and when was the task force created, who is on the task force, who and how decided who is on the task force. And so the question, I went over some of the slides at the beginning where we talked about how we were charged by the independent monitor to begin this work. We sent out and asked for volunteers to come together and do this work. So the task force is about, I think, 16 people. We have divided into multiple subcommittees to work on the managed choice task force work and then the zone reconfiguration work. And we also have, in addition to the task force, an advisory committee that is community partner based. So it has members from community-based organizations, from parent groups. We have asked that anyone who is interested in participating go to our RCSD site that is dedicated to rezoning, and you can submit your name if you're interested in participating as well. We want participation from the community to make sure that we have all perspectives included. Okay, so let's see. We had another question about, did the task force ask for staff input? There have been many problems with zone lines that some of our staff have been facilitating for years. Did you ask people who know the problems? So we've tried to ask as many different representative groups for their feedback on our recommendations thus far. And that includes bargaining units, that includes going to different representative groups for parents and for students. And so once again, we also have the advisory teams where we would love to receive additional feedback and have input there. Okay, so let's see. Another question is, can you present the transportation costs associated with each of these options? What funds can we free up to spend on other things? As of right now, we do not have direct input about what transportation costs could be affected. That's still being developed based on the 3 recommendations that we have come up with. However, as soon as we're able to determine the transportation costs, we will definitely share that and make sure that that's made available to the board when they need to use this information to make decisions. Let's see. There was another one that came from Donna on YouTube. What was Dr. Jallo's concern, which started this off? So in the academic and financial plan, which you can take a look at on our site, which is www.rcsdk12.org, you can see Dr. Jallo's academic and financial plan, and she brought a very analytic lens to the district where she was looking at a lot of the different systems and the processes that we currently have in place. And she was challenging the district to re-examine these for efficiency and effectiveness. So one of the things that Dr. Jallo challenged us to look at was our current process for placements and for students' zone reconfiguration in schools, and making sure that we are providing the most equitable access to education for our students in the district. So that's part of the work that we were challenged to do, that we were allowed to answer that charge and bring forth any recommendations based on that analysis to the board so that they can use that for determination of efficiency. So we have an additional parent who is now in the waiting room. So we want to give this parent the opportunity to have her chance to speak. So Cynthia Clay, you are next and the floor is yours. If you have any streaming on in the background, we just ask that you mute it so that it doesn't interrupt with you speaking. Cynthia, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. I know that you're connecting to audio, so no rush. While Cynthia is connecting, I'll just answer another question from Teresa Kenyon on YouTube. Her concern was that she has a sincere hope that there will be no zone changes before fall 2021. Our district families have already made their choice for fall 2021, and that deadline was April 1st, 2021. Will this be affected? No, this will not affect any family choices that have been made on or before the deadline of April 1st, 2021. As a matter of fact, the recommendations that we are developing and putting forth in front of the Board of Education would not be able to take place any sooner than the 22-23 school year. So this will not affect any family choices that were made, especially before the deadline or on the deadline for the upcoming school year. So no worries there. So we're still trying to troubleshoot Ms. Clay, getting her in, but as soon as she's in, we'll turn over the gavel, so to speak, for her to go ahead and speak. But in the meantime, I'll just make sure that I'm looking over if there's any questions. I will make sure to answer them now, or have members of our task force who are present to be able to answer. Ms. Clay, are you in yet? No, she doesn't have the audio yet. So I'm still looking to see if there's any additional questions. I have not seen any additional questions come in yet. Let's see. There's a question that came in, but I won't necessarily answer it now, but I want to make sure I read it for the recording, which is, has anyone considered the impact of the current policy as a driver of transiency? I'm going to also see if there's any additional speakers so I do not see any additional comments that have come in, and I don't see any additional questions that have come in yet. All right, so I have one more question that's come in. Will pre-K students be included in the new zones? Currently, they can attend any school. When they register for kindergarten, sometimes this becomes a problem because they cannot stay at the current school they are attending. So we are looking at the pre-K conduit for our students, and that is part of the managed choice work that is being done. So rest assured, we are looking at the pre-K enrollment patterns, because we want to make sure that when we have our students in our buildings and the opportunity is there with pre-K, that we try to maximize that and keep our families and our students at the building that they are at. So we also want to talk about the fact that if you did not get an opportunity to speak tonight, or if you still have additional comments or concerns or questions or feedback that you want to provide to us, the task force and I and the district would love to hear from you. We have a survey that will be open tomorrow, and you'll be able to log on to our website and we will be able to see and receive your feedback. We will have this available in multiple languages for you to access. We will also have the opportunity for you to leave comments, and we really want to have as much of your participation as possible. I appreciate everyone who has come tonight and taken time out of your evening to talk about rezoning and reconfiguration with us. So that is definitely appreciated by me and the team. And we will have the opportunity for anyone and everyone to give further feedback when they are able to take our survey and give us additional information. So we can see you, Ms. Clay.
How many, please?
You're in, Ms. Clay. Ms. Clay, you're next.
Oh, okay, thank you. Give me a blank. Sorry, I'm busy and at a store. Oh, sorry, I apologize. My only question was, why do we need to be rezoning during a pandemic? And what use is it? Why are we gonna rezone and possibly close schools when in a few years these schools are gonna open back up, and then we're gonna have children that aren't gonna be serviced? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you, Ms. Clay. So we're talking about tonight is just where to draw the lines in the actual district. We're not talking about closing any schools tonight, and any changes or reconfiguration that we would be recommending would not take place before the 22-23 school year. Thank you, Mrs. Clay. So also there came a question in from Rebecca. Will this rezoning affect the citywide schools like SOA or World of Inquiry? And the answer is no. The question about citywide school and that development, that will be separate. We will still maintain citywide schools. And if anything, we want to see if we can expand access to some of these programs if possible, so that students, no matter what zone or area that they are in, have access to the programming that are available in some of the citywide schools that they might not necessarily have access to. So as Dr. Peluso had mentioned, our information that we're trying to make sure that we present to the community is we've heard from some of our community members that there are programs that might be existing in one zone versus another. So part of our recommendation is looking to proliferate more of these programs across the district as well. So we are looking to make sure that we maintain our citywide schools, but also to make sure that we offer an opportunity to the board to consider ways to expand the the programs out to our students as well. So it does not appear that we have any further questions, and we don't have any more speakers that are signed up. So I would love to just let everybody know that we are so grateful to everybody who spent this evening and took time out to come and give us feedback and send in your questions and your feedback. Once again, I would encourage you to check out our survey in the morning and give us your feedback there. And I appreciate you spending time with us today. And I look forward to having you collaborate with our task force in the future to help us develop a roadmap for our schools moving forward. Thank you so much. And I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful evening.